Welcome to this UL What You Need to Know tutorial. This tutorial is intended for those who own or work for a UL listed monitoring center that is required to comply with the new UL 1981 Revision 3 and/or UL 827 Update 8 changes. Upon completion of this tutorial, you should be able to describe the changes to the UL 1981 and 827 and how they affect your business, explain why these changes were made, identify which changes were made in Manitou to accommodate the updates to the UL standards, find and collect the appropriate reporting within Manitou for UL inspections, and describe what steps you must take to be ready by the due dates. Why did the 1981 and 827 standards for UL have to change? Technology shifts over the past decades caused there to be some ambiguity between the two standards. UL 1981 was specifically written to deal with automation and the accounts monitored by the alarm automation, while 827 was written to deal with the hardware and physical buildings. With the advent of virtual machines and the like, things became a bit more ambiguous as to which standard was responsible for which elements. The updates made to these standards recreated the separations and clarified which standards were responsible for what. The UL standards changed in the following ways to help clarify the differences between the two. UL 1981 updated sections 6.2.6 and 7 clarified that the passwords cannot be repeated for at least 6 reset periods, cannot include the username, and cannot be simple such as ABCD or 1234. User IDs must be a minimum of 6 characters in length, and ensures that if your session sits idle for 15 minutes, you are logged out automatically. 10.2.1 and 2 detail the fact that the automation system must be able to produce standardized statistical reports for accounts that show the number of alarm investigations made and the alarms where the monitoring center deployed an alarm runner. In addition, the reports need to be able to be broken down by certificate type such as fire and burglary alarm systems and residential, including the elapsed time and the longest and shortest times and the differences between the times. 11.1.9 describes the importance of tracking and generation of alarms when runaway conditions exist, and when and how they expect the events to be generated as runaway. 14.2.1 and 2 adds the requirement to track the performance and volume of the hardware CPU, central processing unit, usage and data storage for each computer in use for the monitoring center operations. It also requires that there be a visual and audible notification of any utilization that exceeds 80% with tracking of all notifications. 17.2 requires that the monitoring center has documentation for operation, testing, maintenance procedures, and recommended testing frequency. 827 updated section 17.6 and introduces the MU rating system that weights all customer records within the monitoring operation. When sites exceed specific thresholds, they must have redundant hardware or a redundant operating location. The new password requirements will be more strictly enforced, and you will be required to set your Manitou options to ensure that you remain compliant. There is a new option setting for enhanced security in Manitou. User IDs must be a minimum of 6 characters in length. Operators will be forced to not repeat passwords for at least 6 changes. A minimum length of 6 characters with at least 1 alpha and 1 numeric character will be required. Passwords may not include the username or any derivation of the username, and passwords may not be simple successions of letters or numbers such as 1234 or ABCD. These new requirements can be difficult to manage if the usernames are initials or the like, because passwords could unintentionally include these same letters in the same order. This is an excellent opportunity to review your usernames and consider your options going forward. The Alarm Response Report. Response times are tracked and reported for most UL monitored accounts. Therefore, the UL Response Report helps identify and report recorded runner activity for this purpose. Here are some of the particulars. At a minimum, the most recent month where more than 100 alarm investigations occurred. At a maximum, the alarm investigations that occurred in the most recent 6 months. Alarms where a runner was required but not dispatched or did not arrive shall be included. All statistics are broken down by certificate type, burglar, fire, and the account number. The total number of events requiring operator action that occurred in certified accounts. Operator acknowledgement time shall be listed by the longest time, average time, and shortest time. Runner response elapsed time shall be listed by the longest time, average time, and shortest time. Elapsed time shall be determined by using the difference between the time recorded for the receipt of the alarm signal at the central station and the time recorded at the central station as a result of the signal given by the runner representing the operating company upon arrival at the entrance of the subscriber's premises. These can be referenced in 10.1.3e in your standard. Runaway. Manitou already had a mechanism for notifying on runaway events for specific numbers of signals within a set period of time. This generates an alarm called a runaway warning to an operator's attention. These settings are configured within the Manitou Supervisor workstation. The intersignal time is the time between the first and next signal, meaning that when a signal comes in at 12 o'clock and 0 seconds, and the next signal comes in at 12 o'clock and 11 seconds, the intersignal time is 11 seconds. If your intersignal time setting is set to 30 seconds, then the count increases from 1 to 2, and the intersignal timer resets to 0 and starts waiting again for the next signal to arrive. If the next signal arrives at 12 minutes and 32 seconds, that is 21 seconds later, and therefore the counter then increments to 3, and the timer then resets to 30 seconds and begins to wait for the next signal. If the next signal arrives at 12:01 and 5 seconds, that is more than 30 seconds later, and the counter then kicks back down to 1, and the timer resets to 30 seconds again. When events are triggered in rapid succession, the timer and counts are nearly irrelevant as the system clearly is in runaway. Manitou does take both signals and alarms into account when making its calculations. See the quick reference guide available in the resource library for useful information. When a runaway alarm presents to an operator, the operator is presented with a specific action pattern that guides them through their procedure. CPU capacity requirements. The amount of unused CPU capacity for each computer and bandwidth of the networks must be stored as a report, and if the utilization exceeds 80%, an audible and visual notice is made in the operating room, as well as the technical support staff is to be notified. The technical staff should retain a record of that notice. Manitou's dashboard can display that information 24/7. Also, the Watchdog feature in Manitou's Supervisor workstation can be configured to generate an alarm with automatic notifications going to the technical staff before an operator even actions the alarm event. This can be tracked completely within Manitou and then reported on as needed. Mu factor calculation. The Mu report is a new calculation that determines when a monitoring center requires additional equipment and when they require a secondary location of reasonable distance from the first. UL 827 added this requirement to ensure that the UL-listed monitoring centers meet specific requirements based on their adjusted customer base size. The Mu calculation helps determine this. Mu stands for Monitoring Equivalent Weight. These weights are based on residential, commercial, and if the account has monitored open-close events. Residential accounts without monitored open-close count for 1/3 of a customer record. Inactive commercial accounts, these are commercial accounts without open-close monitoring, count as 1 customer record. Any account with monitored open-close accounts count as 3 for each system partition that is monitored for open-close. When calculated, this then determines where the business falls within the prescribed spectrum and if they require redundancy of their servers or a secondary location. The rules are as follows. Mu factor of 1 through 999, the site may run manually or with a single automation system without redundancy. 1,000 to 9,999, the site is required to have redundant automation servers. A Mu factor of 10,000 to 99,999, the site is required to have a separate tertiary automation system of equal or greater size as the redundant automation system. Sites with a mu factor of 100,000 or greater are required to have a redundant site that is located a reasonable distance from the current site where it won't be impacted by the same weather or other conditions. There are two new reports to meet the new changes made in UL 1981 and 827 standards, the Alarm Response Report and the Mu Factor Report. The Alarm Response Report can be run on demand when your UL inspector arrives. The Mu Factor Report can be downloaded from your dashboard at any time in preparation for your inspection, and you can display the latest data to your inspector when they arrive. Manitou Neo is compliant with the UL changes. When do you need to be compliant? If you are UL 1981, you need to have your software updated to Manitou Neo 2.0 by July 31, 2018. This update does require your server to be Windows Server 2012 R2 and SQL version 2012. If your servers require a hardware upgrade to manage your new operating system, now is a good time to start considering these. We also offer Manitou Cloud Services as an option to help reduce your hardware costs. To schedule your update, please contact the Bold support team to get more detail and see the Introduction to Manitou Neo document available in the resource library. If your site has a mu rating of 100,000 or greater, you'll have until 2020 to find and launch a secondary site. Some important things to also consider are: operator sessions idle for 15 minutes will be force logged out. It will be even more important for your operators to be vigilant and pay attention to their workstations. Monthly failover is clearly enumerated and will be verified. If you aren't in the practice now, start. Get in the habit and build it into your schedule. Failover processes should be just like changing out anything else. There should be people on every shift comfortable with this process. During this tutorial, we introduced you to why UL 1981 and 827 were updated to clarify the differences between the two standards and update where each are different. We also listed the changes to the two standards. Then we discussed what changes happened in Manitou Neo 2.0 to address these changes. After that, we shared with you two reports newly involved with your UL inspection. And finally, we covered actions that you can take to be ready by the due dates. We are excited to help you transition to Manitou Neo and keep you compliant with UL. If you have questions or want to get scheduled to move to Manitou Neo, please contact support@bullgroup.com.